Logical morning, everyone. Welcome to Vidhigya presents the Hindu newspaper analysis. Today's session will have following segments. First, overview of today's newspaper. Second, must-know topics and explanation. And third, quiz time with 5 important questions. So starting with the first segment, the first segment we will see today's overview of today's newspaper. So in today's newspaper also most of the news is related to Russia Ukraine. So first article is fighting in Ukraine must stop. So UN chief has said that Russia should withdraw its armed forces from the Ukraine. So NPM sends 4 ministers for evacuation. So we have already discussed all this information related to Russia Ukraine, and the like in UNSC resolution was pushed. Resolution is 8979 but got rejected, could not pass because Russia used its veto power. So the second article, important article, is Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change warns on multiple climate hazards. So this topic we'll discuss in detail. The next important article is, so this topic, talk to end war must as sanction on Russia will hurt the wider world. So we have discussed about that Western countries along with other Asian countries are also imposing sanction on Russia. And yesterday also we have discussed about SWIFT transaction system, and that countries have come together to impose SWIFT restriction on Russian banks. So that also we have discussed how SWIFT transaction works. So now another article is debunking Russia's international law justification. So in this topic, in this article, we will discuss that the justification that Russia is being giving for annexing, or for you can say invading Ukraine. So we will discuss what are the international provisions and why these justifications are wrong. So this we will discuss in detail. Now, Ukraine situation, India's national interest. So in this topic, it talk about that start gives Russia-Ukraine crisis. Then it says that what is the ultimate goal of Russia? So it says that his ultimate goal seems to be make Ukraine into a vassal of his future as yet imaginary Russian-led sovereign. So he wants that Putin wants Russia to be its vassal state and to be controlled as per Russian interests. So now we have discussed that it's written the Narendra Modi government, or we can say Indian government has decided to abstain to on the vote of UNSC. So we have seen that India abstained from voting in UNSC resolution. So what it says? So he says that the prime minister should be surely recognize that BRICS. So India is a party of BRICS. So what is BRICS? So we'll discuss that. So it says that India is a party to BRICS. So in BRICS there are 5 countries. BRICS. These are Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. So it says India is a party to BRICS, and it should recognize that BRICS in its New Delhi declaration has resolved that the 5 BRICS nations were opposed to unilateral use of force against any state. So the BRICS charter or BRICS agreement also states that it says that the countries will not use unilateral force against any state, and wanted all disputes resolved by peaceful means, and categorically ruled out the use of force. So the Russia's invasion of Ukraine goes against this agreement of BRICS. So we underscore the inadmissibility of threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence. So it says that the 5 countries have agreed not to use force against any state. And Russia, by invading Ukraine, has violated the resolution to which India was also a prominent party. So it says that it is linking Russia-Ukraine crisis. It is linking Russia-Ukraine crisis with the BRICS, and therefore linking it with India, that India is also a party to the member of BRICS, and BRICS countries have agreed not to use force unilaterally, which Russia is doing. So it says that the BRICS does not seem to have any importance left if the agreements made in the BRICS or the promises made in the BRICS are not being met. So this is what this article says. It says today's the invasion and aggression against Ukraine has in fact cremated the spirits of BRICS. So this is what I've told you. So Mr. Putin is all about openly acting his belief that Ukraine is a not legitimate sovereign state into aggressive action. The Russia case for war is thus built of admitting about Ukraine's history in Article say. So it is nothing. Mainly it says that how India is linked with crisis. This crisis that which have agreed not to use force under BRICS agreement, of which India is also a party. However, Russia did not Russia did not follow this agreement. Russia used its force unilaterally. Therefore, it seems that BRICS does not have any legitimacy left in it, and therefore India must also reconsider its decision in the UNSC, in the UNGA or UNSC. This is also important. So India would vote for it after the UNGA assembly adopts any reasonable amendment. So through reasonable amendment, India can also say that we would like to vote, because now India is saying that Russia is not following any international law or the regional agreements that are there with India. So this is the situation. The Silver Line is not a vanity project. This we have discussed earlier also, but in this topic we will discuss in detail about why Silver Line project is not just a project for elite or a vanity project. Rather, it is a project aiming to improve the economy or GDP of the Kerala, that we will discuss in detail. Now, IPCC warns of multiple climate hazards, that we will discuss. Another important topic, Quad grouping is a diplomatic arrangement, US commander. So we have discussed about Quad. There are four countries, Australia, Japan, US, India. Then we have discussed exercise, that is Malabar exercise. Objective is free, open, and prosperous Indo-Pacific region, prosperous Indo-Pacific. So all this we have discussed. So it is a diplomatic arrangement. It also says that it is not to counter China. This is not specifically made to counter China. So there is nothing much. So basic information I have told you have to remember this. So adopt Gati Shakti, more details, private sector. So this we will discuss. Then this is factual information. After Russian attack, world's largest cargo plane may never fly. So this plane has also been attacked by Russia. So remember the name. Its name is Antonov AN-225 aircraft, also known as Miria. With its 32-wheel landing gear, first took the skies in 1988. So this is the basic information that you have to remember about this. That this is the world's largest cargo plane built in Ukraine by Ukraine, and its name is this, and also known as Miria. It took first sky in 1988. Also, India, this has come to in India also. It made in landing in India in May 26th at Hyderabad Shamshabad Airport while en route to Perth to deliver a 117-ton power generator from Prague, that is Czech Republic, to a mine in Australia. So this has also landed in India. So this is also important in case they ask whether this plane has ever landed in India. So yes, it has. And we have discussed about its name and all. So Ukraine seeks to join European Union as first round of talks with Russia ends. The Ukraine is asking the European Union to admit Ukraine in the European Union. However, there are procedures so which will take years to admit. So, but it is a symbolic move. It is a symbolic move that Ukraine wants to join. So it is just mere symbolic move. We can discuss about European Union. There are 27 countries in European Union, and last year in 2021, Britain left European Union by a process known as Brexit. So that is all there on this topic. This topic we will discuss in our explanation section. Turkey may access to Russian warship. And that's all for the first segment, that is overview. Now we'll start with our discussion. So the first topic, IPCC warns of multiple climate hazards. So there are two articles related to this. So we'll combine this article and discuss. So what it says the world faces unavoidable multiple climate hazards over the next 2 decades with global warming of 1.56. So the way the people are behaving, the burning of fossil fuels and like greenhouse gas emission, it will says it next 2 days, the global warming will increase by 1.5 degrees Celsius. And even temporarily exceeding this warming level would mean additional severe impact. So even if it happens for temporary, it will mean that severe weather impacts on the population across the world, some of which will be irreversible according to, and some of which would be irreversible, such as like melting of glaciers. The rise in weather and climate extreme have led to some irreversible impact as natural and human system are pushed beyond their ability to. So in last few years, we have been seeing there are extreme weather events happening. There are increased drought, increased rainfall is happening, and we have seen that the temperature has been increasing. It's a lot, like reaching 50, 52 degree Celsius. So it is seen that because of the greenhouse gas emission or because of the global warming, because of the rise in temperature, the extreme events are increasing day by day. So now what is important is that COP26 summit in Glasgow last year. So it's a COP26, that is Conference of Parties. Conference of Parties is a summit happened every year. So in 2021, that is in 2021, it is known as COP26, 26th meeting. So wherein Prime Minister Modi declared India will achieve. So India have declared five target in COP25, COP26, the five target, also known as Panchamitra, also known as Panchamrit. So you have to remember these five targets. This can be asked in your exam. And what are these five targets? That India will achieve net zero emission latest by 2070. Net zero by 2070. This is first. Second, that there will be no net carbon emission. Second is by 2030, India would also ensure 50% of energy will be from renewable sources. So by 2030, 50% energy by renewable sources. Number third, 500 gigawatt energy from renewable energy sources. So India, this is 500 gigawatt renewable energy by 2030. And another is that India will reduce its carbon emission until 2030 by a billion tons. So by 1 billion ton, India will reduce its carbon emission by 2030. This is fourth. And number fifth, and there is one more, that its emission intensity per unit GDP by less than 45%. And India will cut its emission intensity per unit of GDP by less than 45%. So these are the five things that by 2070 net zero emission, 500 gigawatt energy from renewable energy by 2030, cut emission by 1 billion ton by 2030, and 50% of its energy by renewable energy resources by 2030, and 45% emission by 2030 per capita. So it is written here that, and cut its emission intensity per unit of GDP, not per capita, per unit of GDP by less than 45%. So these are the five goals that India has mentioned in COP 2065 happened in the Glasgow. So you have to remember this. It's a Glasgow where it happened. COP 26 in Glasgow. What are India's target? That India has set five targets, and these are the five targets. So now article says, according to IPCC report, global sea level will rise by 44 to 76 centimeter this year if government meets their current emission cutting pledge. So it says that if government able to meet their pledge targets, if their government is able to meet their targets, so by the end of this century, there will be 44 to 76 centimeter rise in sea level. With faster emission cut, the increase could be eliminated. However, if countries across the world able to reach target more than what they have said, then also it will lead to 28 to 555 centimeter increase in sea level rise. But with the higher emission, and if ice sheets collapse more quickly than expected, sea level could rise by much as 2 meter this century and by 5 meter by 2150. So it says that if the targets are not met, then by 2050, by 2150 only, we can see a huge, like in greater rise in sea level. So this is what it says, that it depends on how well the countries achieve their target. If they are able to achieve their target well in advance, then the sea level rise will be less. If not, then sea level rise will be higher. And this is important. So this is a question that can be asked: which of the following statements could be true? Could be true. In these are the assumption based questions. Now we have discussed five Panchamitra also. That is a factual thing that you have to remember. That is related to COP26 happened in Glasgow. Glasgow. We have now high confidence that the accelerating climate crisis is increasing water related issues. Because of accelerating climate crisis, we have seen floods, we have seen cloud burst, we have like Chamoli disaster, and we have seen that increased earthquakes are happening, landslides are happening because of the flood, and we have seen tsunami. There are cyclones, increased number of cyclones, as you can witness in last 1 year. There were increased number of cyclone with high intensity. So all these are leading to water related diseases, because water gets contaminated, and therefore waterborne diseases are very much on rise. Second, we have high confidence that climate change will severely impact food production and food security, and it will also impact our food production, because increased rainfall will lead to fall in the productivity. Increased drought will lead to the fall in crop productivity, and this will threaten our food security. So this is how it is related to food security also. Third, droughts and heat waves will trigger biodiversity loss as well as human migration. Because of droughts, there will be loss of biodiversity because plants and animal will die because of the increase, because of the less availability of water for them. So this is also, and heat waves. Heat waves we have seen because many people are dying across world due to heat waves. So in USA also we have witnessed, in USA, Brazil, there are continuously death because of heat waves. India also. So because of this, there will be loss of biodiversity and human migration. So human migration, when human migrate from one city to another city, we'll see this this city will be overcrowded. Then there will be unplanned urbanization, which will lead to further diseases, increase in diseases, and the city will not be able to cater the need of the increased population. So these are crises. These are the impacts of increase in the greenhouse gases or increase in the global temperature. Now, next article is debunking Russia's international law justification. So this becomes an important topic. So we will discuss. Russia seems to rely on the controversial theory of remedial succession. First thing we need to know about remedial succession. So which posits that unilateral succession of territory from the parent state in the most extreme case. So what is remedial succession? So it allows the unilateral succession of a territory from parent state. For example, what Russia is doing. So this is Ukraine and this is Donbass. These are two groups, Luhansk and Donetsk. So it is saying it happens that remedial succession can act in this region only when extreme cases. So even if an arguable case could be made for remedial succession, it requires a very high threshold. However, for remedial succession, there is a need for higher threshold, very high threshold is required, such as severe violation of human rights and systematic operation of ethnic Russians by Ukraine. So Russia has to show that in this region there is a severe human rights violation and there is a systematic operation of ethnic Russians by Ukraine. However, Russia's claim on the genocide of ethnic Russians are not backed by evidence. However, Russia is claiming that they are doing as a measure of remedial succession, but Russia does not have any proof to show that remedial succession is warranted in case of Donbas region. So this is one, that is how this article says, this is how it's debunking Russia's international justification. Second point, in recognizing the statehood of Donetsk and Luhansk, Russia has violated Article 2, Clause 4 of UN Charter by undermining Ukraine's territorial integrity. So it says how Russia has undermined Ukraine's territorial integrity under Article 2, Clause 4 of UN Charter. So what Article 2, Clause 4 of UN Charter says that all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state or in any other purpose, in any other manner inconsistent with the purpose of UN. So it prevents use of threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. So which Russia failed to do. Russia has because Russia used the force against the Ukraine. Therefore, it violates Article 2, Clause 4 of UN Charter. So these are 2 points. First is we have discussed remedial succession. Second is Article 2, Clause 4 of UN Charter. Now, third, the Russian illegality has not been restricted to just this. The Russian missile strikes in the Ukraine include non-military objects, and the Russian force marching through Ukrainian soil are the ruthless exhibition of the use of force in international sources, which Article 2, Clause 4 of the UN Charter prescribes. So it also says that Russia is not using its missiles and targets only to the military targets, not using for military targets, but there are non-military objects also. So this is against Article 2, Clause 4. So bizarrely, Mr. Putin claims that he is acting in self-defense as per Article 15 of UN Charter. 51. So he's saying that Russia says that they are acting in as per Article 51 of UN Charter. UN Charter. Article 51 says about self-defense. Self-defense. So what this article says, that Article 51 recognizes the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense. So it is either individual or collective in case of an armed attack by one state against another state. So this is how Article 51 says. However, Russia has not launched any armed attack against Russia warranting defensive strike. Since Ukraine has not launched any armed attack against Russia, therefore Russia cannot use Article 51 to use the provisions of self-defense. So this is the third point. This is how it debunks the Russia's third point. This is how it debunks Russia's international justification. The right to collective self-defense under Article 51 exists only for states. So under 51, it exists only for states. So states, Donetsk and Luhansk are not states under international. However, Donetsk and Luhansk are not states. These are rebel groups, separatist region who are trying to separate from Ukraine, but these are not states under international law. Therefore, Article 51 used by Russia cannot be used, and it is in violation of UN Charter. Russia's action is in violation of Article 51 of UN Charter. So this is how this article debunks the justification of Russia and international law. Another point is that Mr. Putin also indirectly invoked the controversial doctrine of humanitarian intervention and also termed responsibility to protect in international law for its action. So it is also debunking that humanitarian intervention, that Russia is intervening upon humanitarian ground in Donbas region where two groups, Luhansk and Donetsk, are acting. So in international law for its action. So Russia is using this responsibility to protect clause on humanitarian grounds in this region. So R2P stems from every state's responsibility to protect its population from gross violation of human rights and the international community's responsibility in assisting a state to fulfill such responsibility. Controversially, this principle has been stressed to justify use of force. So R2P is available for the state. So for the state to protect its population, it is for the state to protect its population, but not applicable to another country intervening in the domestic affairs of another country and then claiming that we are doing this for humanitarian ground under R2P. So this is how this is also in violation of international norms. So controversially, this principle has been stressed to justify the use of force by third state in territory of a state which has failed in its duty to protect citizen. So Russia says that Ukraine has failed to protect the human rights of its citizen in Donbas region. Therefore, under R2P, Russia is coming to Ukraine in order to protect the human rights of people in Donbas region. However, this R2P is available to state only for its own population, Therefore, this claim of Russia is also not validated. So these are the points related to this topic. Now, this is an important article that the Silver Line is not a vanity project. So we have discussed in earlier lecture, the Silver Line is a semi high-speed rail network, which is being planned in the Kerala. So it is a 30 kilometer distance between Kerala's capital. It operates between Thiruvananthapuram to Kasaragod. It is a 530 kilometer journey. This journey takes at least 12 hours now, but now it will reduce from 12 to 4 hours. The state government, for its part, is yet to convince the people that railway line can be actually a catalyst. However, there are claims that this will not help, because that's why it says it's not a vanity. So it's the role of the state government to convince its population that the aim of the project is for a progressive transformation of Kerala's economy. It is the role of a state government to convince its people that it will help in Kerala's economic growth. So now we'll discuss how this happened. So building an electric public transport is centralizing to realizing Kerala's economic. So it says building an electric public transport is central to realizing Kerala's economic ambition. So it says that this public transport system is important in Kerala for Kerala's economic ambition. The proposed semi-high-speed railway, which will cover 11 of Kerala's 14 districts, assumes importance in this context. So it says that this is why this Silver Line project is important for Kerala's economic prospect, and it will operate in 14 districts out of 11 districts out of 14 districts in Kerala. The Silver Line could serve the function of a fast-paced suburban rail system for the whole of Kerala, with each of its stops becoming nodes for future growth. So the article compares that Silver Line will act as Mumbai's local train, and that how it will help in Kerala's economic growth, and it will pass through multiple districts. Therefore, it will be a node that particular stop will also become a point of economic growth of that particular district. Now, the state government has to drive home the point that Silver Line is not a vanity project, but a part of long-term effort to modernize the economy and create new jobs. It says it will modernize the economy and it will also create jobs. So these are 2 points also. Many of the criticism against the rail network will simply wither away when project is viewed as a part of tomorrow. So you have to also show that we are not planning it for tomorrow. It is for not planning it for today. It is for tomorrow's economy. It is for tomorrow's betterment. So then this is also, and why tomorrow? Because for upcoming generation, it will get modernized public transport and jobs will also be generated. But in long run, there are doubts that a public transport system such as Silver Line run on renewable energy and capable of carrying more than a million passengers a day will help reduce population. So now it says that in Kerala, there are increased number of personal vehicles. And because of Kerala's geography, because of Kerala's dense geography and like forest and mountain, the capacity of Kerala to build more road network is limited, and because of the rising number of personal vehicles, these road networks will not be able to fulfill the demands of these private vehicles. Therefore, what is required is public transport. And when the more numbers of private transports are running on these road, it will generate more green. It will release more greenhouse gases and and this will lead to more pollution and global warming. And we have seen the impacts of global warming in the previous article, that is IPCC article. So it says when there will be a high speed rail network which will carry more than a million passengers a day, will help reduce population pollution and carbon emission. So this article says that the Silver Line project will also reduce pollution and carbon emission. So this is important in achieving India's target by 2030 and reducing the pollution and greenhouse gas emission. It is also clear that a land-scarce Kerala cannot afford to depend on rail network for its future transport need. We have discussed it. The number of motor vehicles on states road has doubled over last 2 decades, which we have discussed. Compared to six-lane national highway, the proposed semi-high-speed railway will require only half of the amount, but can carry three times traffic. So you see, this railway will take one half of the land which is needed by the road, which is needed by for the road transport, and this will carry three times population than the road will carry. So this is how it is. This is why it is important. This Silver Line project is important. So the fears that construction of semi-high-speed rail will cause natural calamities may be unfounded. Of course, there are fears, but there is no evidence as such. So it says even as it crisscrosses an earthquake-prone terrain, the Japanese speed rail network has seen no fatal accident compared. So it says in Japan also it passes through very high earthquake-prone terrain, but in last six decades, the Japan has not witnessed any fatal accident. Therefore, these claims are unfounded. The concerns regarding environmental impacts and compensation to those who lose their land for project must be looked in. It says that environmental concerns and those people whose land will be taken will be rehabilitated to another area and resettled to another area. Their claims must also to be looked in. And the planning for railway should not be done in isolation. It should not be done in isolation. Need to take care of all the stakeholder environmental concerns also, and those people whose land will be taken, their concerns also needs to be taken. It has to be a wholesome exercise. So, but go in hand with measure to reinvigorate the industrial technology and tourism sector. So it should be a combined exercise, and things should not be taken in a silos manner. Rather, all the stakeholder must be consulted. So this is all about this article. Now another topic is adopt Gati Shakti, more details state private sector. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday urged state governments as well as private sector to adopt Gati Shakti portal to plan infrastructure product and develop special economic zone. So it is a Gati Shakti. What is Gati Shakti? So Gati Shakti program, under which a portal would be set up to bring 16 ministries together for integrated planning and implementation of infrastructure connectivity project. So it is for infrastructure project. You have to remember it is for infra project. Under this, on a web portal, 16 ministries will come together. 16 ministries will come together and will collaborate and coordinate on infra projects. So that is all related to Gati Shakti. That it is related to infra project, 16 ministry on web platform, and that platform can be used by the public. That platform can be used by state government as well as private sector for developing special economic zones and then for developing infrastructure project. One thing that it is, since it is related to infra such as transport, because infra connectivity project. So therefore, Gati Shakti organized by Commerce of Ministry. So you have to remember which ministry? Commerce Ministry. Commerce Ministry. So this is the basic information related to Gati Shakti. You have to remember it is related to Infra Connectivity Project 16 Ministry. It's an online platform where states and private sector can come to adopt Gati Shakti portal to plan their infrastructure project, and it is by Ministry of Commerce. So the next article, last article, Turkey may block access to Russian warships. So till now Turkey was silent, did not say it is an act of war. Now Turkey has said that Russia's invasion is an act of war. So what is important in this article is that the 1930 Montreux Convention governs the free movement of commercial ship in peacetime through Bosphorus and Dardanelles Strait. So as per 1936 Montreux Convention, it governs that movement of commercial ships in peacetime through Bosphorus and Dardanelles Strait, which lies in Black Sea, near Black Sea. And it also grants Turkey the right to block warships in wartime if threatened. And it grants this convention of 1936 grants a right to Turkey to block warship passing through these two straits in wartime if threatened. So Ukraine has officially asked Turkey to close the Dardanelles Strait and thus access to Black Sea to Russian Sea. So if this Dardanelles and Bosphorus Strait will be restricted by Turkey, then the Russian ships will not be able to reach to Black Sea, from which Russia can attack to Ukraine from naval areas, from maritime zone. So this is why it is important. So you have to remember this 1936 Montreux Convention related to Bosphorus and Dardanelles Strait, which is, and in as per this convention, Turkey has a right to block access to ships passing through these two states in wartime if it is threatened. So this is basic information related to this. So factual information you have to remember it about this convention, the two straits, and you have your homework is to go and look where these two straits lie, look into its geography and the countries surrounding these two straits, and then the right, which country has the right? Turkey. So that is all. So now it's time for 5 important questions. So question number 1, India has pledged to achieve net zero emission by which year? Your options are 2050, 2060, 2070, 2030. The correct option is 2070. Question number 2, which article of UN Charter provides for self-defense? Your options are Article 2 Clause 4, Article 2 Clause 1, Article 51, none of the above. And the correct option is 51. Which of the following are rebels group operating in Donbas region? Your option are Luhansk, Donetsk, both of the above, neither A nor B. The correct option is both of the above, Luhansk and Donetsk. Your option Silver Line project is related to which state? Your options are Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Maharashtra, Karnataka. The correct option is Kerala. Question 5, which of the country has right to block warship from Bosphorus and Dardanelles Strait in wartime if threatened? Your options are Israel, Russia, Turkey, none of the above. The correct option is Turkey. We have discussed 1936 Montreux Convention. So that's all for this session. Stay logical with Vidikya, your best pal in CLAT Preps.